Welcome, my friends, and let me tell you a story of greed, deceit, and the unwavering spirit of family. Enjoy the story. Jack Dawson felt like the luckiest man alive as he pulled up to the sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Beverly Hills. Sure, the nursing job was only temporary, but it was a godsend. After being fired from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for blowing the whistle on the head surgeon's unethical practice of reusing bandages, Jack had been struggling to make ends meet. Jobless and freshly moved out of his stepfather's cramped apartment in the valley, this gig to privately care for a wealthy elderly man named Alexander Rothschild was just what the doctor ordered. Remember, Dad sometimes has episodes, Mary, Alex's daughter, had warned Jack over the phone. He hallucinates that he has another wife and son. Just smile and nod if he starts rambling. Oh, and he's rather particular about his routines and diet. I'll leave instructions. Jack took it all in stride. In his years as a nurse, he'd seen it all. Dementia, delusions, difficult patients. It was nothing he couldn't handle. Plus, Mary was offering an obscene amount of money. He'd be a fool to refuse. Straightening his scrubs, Jack rang the doorbell. A severe-looking woman in her 50s answered, her bottle-blonde hair pulled back in a tight chignon. "You must be Jack," she said curtly, looking him up and down. "I'm Mary Rothschild. Come in." As Jack stepped into the cavernous foyer, his jaw nearly hit the floor. Marble floors, sweeping staircases, priceless works of art on the walls. This place made the Ritz look like a Motel 6. He followed Mary through a labyrinth of hallways until they reached a wood-paneled room overlooking the manicured gardens. "This is Dad's suite," Mary said. "He spends most of his time here. Your room is just across the hall." In a massive four-poster bed lay Alexander Rothschild, looking every bit of his 85 years. His skin was as translucent as parchment, his once powerful frame now frail and shrunken. At the moment, he appeared to be asleep, his chest rising and falling with each raspy breath. "Has he been ill long?" Jack asked quietly. "He's been deteriorating for a while," Mary sighed. "The doctors say it's only a matter of time. That's why I hired you, to keep him comfortable in his final days." She showed Jack the array of pill bottles and supplements on the bedside table. "He gets his meds at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 9 p.m. I've written out the dosages. The kitchen will prepare his meals. Just make sure he eats. Other than that, your job is to keep him company and notify me of any changes in his condition." Jack nodded, committing it all to memory. As Mary turned to leave, he couldn't help but notice the enormous diamond glinting on her ring finger. Clearly, the Rothschild fortune was no exaggeration. "One more thing," Mary said, pausing in the doorway. "Dad's mind tends to wander, as I mentioned. Pay no attention to any nonsense about other wives or children. It's just the dementia talking." With that, she was gone, her stilettos clicking down the hallway. Jack settled into the plush armchair by Alex's bed, marveling at the strange new world he found himself in. He had a feeling that this job was going to be anything but ordinary. Over the next few days, Jack fell into a comfortable routine at the Rothschild estate. He'd wake early, enjoy a gourmet breakfast prepared by the household chef, then see to Alex's morning medications and ablutions. The old man spent most of the day dozing, waking only to take his meals and pills before drifting off again. Mary hadn't been exaggerating about Alex's mental state. He'd rouse from sleep in a panic, eyes darting wildly around the room as he called out for his real wife and son. It was heartbreaking to watch, but Jack did as Mary instructed and gently redirected him each time. On the fourth day, as Jack was tidying up the room, Alex suddenly grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "You have to help me," he rasped, his rheumy blue eyes boring into Jack's. "My daughter. She's trying to kill me." Jack's blood ran cold. He'd heard paranoid ramblings from patients before, but something in Alex's voice gave him pause. There was a lucidity there, an urgency that seemed all too real. "What do you mean?" Jack asked carefully, perching on the edge of the bed. "Why would Mary want to hurt you?" "She's not my daughter," Alex whispered. "Not my real daughter. She's Lena's girl." Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. "Who's Lena?" Alex's face crumpled, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. "My second wife. The biggest mistake of my life. I left my true family for her, my sweet Nancy and our boy Michael. But Lena, she was a viper, only wanted me for my money. And Mary's just like her." He gripped Jack's arm even tighter, his nails digging into flesh. "They've been poisoning me, Jack. Slowly, so no one will suspect. They want my fortune and they'll stop at nothing to get it." Jack's head spun. This was far more than the delusional ramblings Mary had described. Alex seemed completely coherent, even if his story sounded like something out of a soap opera. "I'll get you some water," Jack said, gently extricating himself from the old man's grasp. His mind raced as he filled a glass from the bathroom tap. Could there be any truth to Alex's wild claims? And if so, what was he supposed to do about it? When he returned, Alex was sitting up, a manic energy animating his frail frame. "In my desk drawer," he said, pointing a trembling finger. "There's a false bottom. Inside you'll find documents, photographs, proof of who I really am and what they've done. You must find Nancy and Michael. Tell them the truth before it's too late." Jack hesitated, torn between his duty to his patient and his reluctance to get involved in what sounded like a family drama of epic proportions. But the desperation in Alex's eyes tugged at his conscience. If the old man was telling the truth, Jack couldn't just stand by and let him be murdered. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll see what I can find out. But I need you to rest now, Alex. Getting agitated won't help matters." He coaxed the old man to lay back down, promising to investigate his claims discreetly. As Alex drifted off to sleep, Jack pondered his next move. He'd need hard evidence if he was going to accuse Mary of something as monstrous as poisoning her own father. Checking that the coast was clear, Jack rummaged through Alex's desk until he found the secret compartment. Inside was a trove of yellowed papers and faded photographs. There was Alex as a young man, beaming next to a pretty brunette who must have been Nancy. Another photo showed a tow-headed boy grinning gap-toothed at the camera, little Michael. The documents appeared to be legal papers, a marriage certificate, birth records, a deed to a modest house in Pasadena. As he sifted through the artifacts of Alex's past, a plan began to take shape in Jack's mind. First, he'd need proof of Mary's misdeeds. The nanny cam he used to keep an eye on his senile grandmother would be easy enough to repurpose. He'd hide it in Alex's room to capture Mary's actions when she thought no one was looking. Next, he'd hire a private investigator to track down Nancy and Michael. If they were still in the area, they deserved to know the truth about Alex before it was too late. Maybe they could even help expose Mary's scheme and get Alex the justice he deserved. Jack's heart raced at the thought of the risk he was taking. Going up against someone as wealthy and well-connected as Mary Rothschild could cost him a lot more than his job. But his conscience wouldn't let him walk away. He'd taken an oath to protect the vulnerable, and right now, no one was more vulnerable than Alexander Rothschild. He carefully replaced the documents and photos, tucking away a few key pieces of evidence in his pocket. As he watched the rise and fall of Alex's chest, a newfound sense of purpose settled over him. Come what may, he would get to the bottom of this twisted plot, for Alex's sake, and for the family that had been stolen from him all those years ago. Over the next week, Jack played the dutiful nurse by day, all the while gathering evidence of Mary's treachery by night. The hidden camera proved to be a goldmine, capturing hours of damning footage. Each evening, after Jack left for the night, Mary would creep into Alex's room with a sinister-looking black bag. From it, she'd withdraw vial after vial of mysterious liquid, injecting the contents into Alex's IV line with a steady hand. Within minutes, the old man would be rendered completely catatonic, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Even more disturbing was the presence of a shadowy male figure who'd join Mary in her nightly ritual. Though his face was obscured by a surgical mask, Jack could tell by his furtive movements that this was no medical professional. He moved with the ease of a seasoned criminal, assisting Mary in her grim task with cold efficiency. Meanwhile, the private eye Jack had hired was making steady progress in tracking down Nancy and Michael Abernathy, Alex's long-lost family. The detective discovered that Nancy was still living in the same modest bungalow in Pasadena, having never remarried after Alex left. Michael, in a poetic twist of fate, had grown up to become a respected neurologist at UCLA Medical Center. Armed with this knowledge, Jack spent his days off poring over medical textbooks and journals, trying to make sense of Mary's covert drugging regimen. The sheer volume of narcotics and paralytic agents she was administering was staggering, far beyond any therapeutic dose. It was clear that her intention was not to heal, but to slowly and methodically destroy. One evening, as he watched the hidden camera feed in horror, Jack witnessed Mary's accomplice fumble with the vial, sending it skittering under Alex's bed. In a stroke of luck, they failed to retrieve it before slipping out of the room like the criminals they were. Heart-pounding, Jack waited until the coast was clear before dashing into Alex's room and fishing out the errant vial. He recognized the label immediately from his studies: succinylcholine, a potent paralytic used in surgery. In the wrong hands, it could be lethal, suppressing respiratory function until the victim suffocated to death. Jack's hands shook as he pocketed the vial, his mind reeling with the implications. This was the smoking gun he needed to bring Mary to justice and to save Alex's life. He knew he had to act fast before she realized her mistake and took even more drastic measures. The next day, Jack placed a call to Nancy Abernathy. Though she was initially skeptical of the wild story he spun, the tremble in his voice and the mention of Alex's name after so many years convinced her to hear him out. When he revealed the evidence he'd gathered, she broke down in sobs, her heart breaking for the man she'd once loved so deeply. "I never stopped loving him," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Even after he left us, I always hoped he'd come back someday. I never dreamed he was suffering like this." Jack arranged for Nancy and Michael to come to the Rothschild estate under the guise of a routine visit, not wanting to tip off Mary until they could confront her directly. His heart raced as he watched them pull up to the mansion, knowing that the showdown that was about to unfold would change all of their lives forever. The tension in the air was palpable as Jack led Nancy and Michael into Alex's room. The old man's eyes widened in shock and recognition as he took in the sight of his long-lost wife and son, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Nancy," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Michael, is it really you?" Nancy rushed to his bedside, clasping his hand in hers as she wept openly. "Oh, Alex, what have they done to you, my love?" Michael, though more reserved, was no less moved by the sight of his ailing father. He examined the array of medications on the bedside table with a critical eye, his jaw clenching as he recognized the potent cocktail of drugs. "This is criminal," he said tightly. "No doctor in their right mind would prescribe these medications in these doses. It's a wonder you're still alive, Dad." Before Alex could respond, the door burst open and Mary strode in, her face twisted in rage. Her accomplice slunk in behind her, a menacing presence in the shadows. "What the hell is going on here?" Mary snarled, her eyes darting between Jack, Nancy, and Michael. "Who are these people?" Jack stepped forward, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "They're your father's real family, Mary. The ones you've been trying to keep him from all these years." Mary's face drained of color, but she quickly composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said coldly. "I'm the only family Dad has, and I don't appreciate you bringing strangers into my home." "Drop the act, Mary," Michael said, his voice laced with contempt. "We know all about your little scheme. The drugs, the deception, the abuse. It ends now." Mary's accomplice made a move toward Michael, but Jack was faster. He whipped out his phone, the damning video footage queued up and ready. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said evenly. "Not unless you want this video to go viral. I'm sure the police would be very interested to see what you've been up to." Mary's eyes widened as she watched herself on the screen, caught red-handed in her wicked deeds. She lunged for the phone with a shriek of rage, but Michael intercepted her, pinning her arms behind her back with practiced ease. "It's over, Mary," he said, his voice hard. "You're going to pay for what you've done to our father." As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as they approached the mansion. The police had been alerted and were on their way to apprehend Mary and her accomplice. In the chaos, Nancy cradled Alex's face in her hands, her eyes shining with love and forgiveness. "I'm here now, darling," she murmured, "and I'm never leaving you again. We're going to get you the help you need." Alex wept openly, clinging to his wife as though she were a lifeline. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed, "for everything. I was a fool to ever leave you." Michael placed a comforting hand on his father's shoulder, his anger melting into compassion. "It's all right, Dad. We understand. The important thing is that we're together now. We'll get through this as a family." As the police burst into the room, Jack watched the scene unfold with a sense of profound relief. He had done it. Against all odds, he had unraveled the twisted web of lies and deceit and brought a family back together in the process. In the days that followed, Michael used his medical expertise to wean Alex off the toxic cocktail of drugs, slowly nursing him back to health. With Nancy by his side and the love of his true family surrounding him, Alex seemed to gain strength and vitality with each passing day. For Jack, the experience had been nothing short of life-changing. What had started as a simple nursing job had turned into a harrowing journey of discovery and redemption. And in the end, he had not only saved a life, he had given a man back his reason for living. As he packed up his belongings and prepared to leave the Rothschild mansion for the last time, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. This place had been the site of so much pain and heartache, but also of incredible courage and love. Michael caught him as he was heading out the door, a warm smile on his face. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done, Jack," he said, shaking his hand firmly. "You saved my father's life and brought our family back together. I'll never forget that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Jack's palm. "Listen, I know you're out of a job now, but I could really use a man like you on my team at the clinic. Someone with your instincts, your compassion. What do you say?" Jack looked down at the card, a slow grin spreading across his face. A chance to work alongside a brilliant doctor like Michael, helping patients in need? It was more than he could have ever hoped for. "I say yes," he said, clasping Michael's hand in his. "It would be an honor." 1 year later. The sun was shining brightly on the day of Alex and Nancy's vow renewal ceremony. After everything they had been through, the couple had decided to reaffirm their love and commitment to each other in front of their family and closest friends. Jack stood proudly beside Michael, watching with misty eyes as Alex and Nancy exchanged heartfelt promises and slipped gleaming new rings onto each other's fingers. In the front row, Michael's wife and children beamed with joy, a testament to the beautiful family they had all become. As the ceremony concluded and the guests erupted into applause, Jack felt a hand clap him on the shoulder. He turned to see Alex, his eyes twinkling with gratitude and affection. "I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you, son," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life in more ways than one. I'll never be able to repay you for that." Jack shook his head, a lump forming in his throat. "You don't owe me anything, Alex. Being a part of this family, getting to work alongside Michael at the clinic, that's more than enough for me." Alex smiled, pulling Jack into a warm embrace. "You'll always be a part of this family, Jack. Never forget that." As the reception got underway and the happy couple twirled around the dance floor, Jack took a moment to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. He thought back to those early days at the Rothschild mansion, when he had been just a lost soul searching for his place in the world. Now, as he looked around at the smiling faces of his newfound family, he realized that he had found so much more than he ever could have dreamed. He had found love, purpose, and a sense of belonging that would stay with him forever. And as he raised his glass to toast the happy couple, Jack knew that no matter what the future held, he would always have the strength and courage to face it head-on. For he had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that with love and family by your side, anything was possible. So he clinked his glass against Michael's, a grin spreading across his face as he looked out over the joyful celebration. This was only the beginning, he knew, the start of a brand new chapter in a story that was still being written, and he couldn't wait to see where it would take him next.